All right, so I've sent out GIFs of hucks, but I just have a few hucks here that I wanted to walk through a little slower. So here we go. This is one of those common things that I've been trying to push. You get a thrower, and then you get one person on top of that thrower with space. So in this scenario, there's another player over here. There's also another player over here on the far left. But in general, this person here has a ton of space. And we got a thrower with a person on top of them. You're set up to do something dangerous on offense. And as we watch this huck go, if we just focus on what is this person doing with their body as they throw the huck, the first thing I'll point out is notice how in this moment, this frame right here, their chest is pointed backwards. And then as I roll through, boom, their chest is now coming forwards. So here's their chest now coming forwards. So that's just trunk rotation. So this is all, a lot of people will say this is in your hips, this is in your core. This is just a trunk rotation to get a lot of power behind the disc. I talk a lot about snapping the wrist, and in a few of the future examples, in the next examples in this video, I'm going to focus a lot on the wrist. But in this one, you can see the elbow is driving through, and it is true that driving an elbow through will get you more power. You can throw the frisbee further if you drive your elbow and then snap the wrist. But both pieces, I think, are really important. So I think you're seeing a full chain here. You're seeing core rotation, you're seeing the elbow drive, and you're seeing a wrist snap. And all of those things are kinetically moving through the chain at the same time to create just a lot of power. So here, as you can see, that elbow is now leading. The elbow is putting snapping power, and we're going to get wrist at the very end. The end result is just a very flat huck that is out to space, middle of the field, let your person run onto it. It's just a really good huck with a lot of power. And you can see how it's driven. This ball doesn't if it obviously sits in space, but it is on like the same level. It's like a line drive out there. It doesn't like meatball high up in the air. And I'm about to show you a meatball example to help you understand what I'm trying to say there. So this is an example of that meatball idea where we watch this frisbee come out. You can see that it starts low and it just gets really high up in the air. This ball like rises quite a bit. I think it's rising a lot more than the previous example we saw where it was like much more of a line drive. And the difference here, I think, there's still a lot of core rotation. You can see this person's chest back here. You can see how their chest is pointed to the back of the end zone. As they come through, you can see how their chest gets like 90 degrees. I think the other example we saw a full 180. So right now their chest is kind of pointing over here. If I go back a little bit to like here, we've got the example where their chest is fully backwards. So I think this person's getting less core rotation than what we saw in the previous example. But what I was really meant to focus on was like these frames like right here. So in this moment, you can see their right hand on the disc, and you can see the full disc. It's on the left-hand side of their hand. And as we just go a few frames later, the disc goes from completely on this person's, the disc is completely on the left side of their hand, and then it is immediately on the right side of their hand. And the only way to whip a disc around, the only way to get it from one side to the other that quickly is wrist snap. So I'm using this as an example of how you can huck with wrist. And I think this meatball, this kind of like pitch it up into the sky and let it float kind of thing, I think you get that from a wrist snap huck. Whereas those line drive hucks that we saw in the first example, that's much more of, full core rotation, drive your elbow, drive your wrist, and throw through. That'll give you that line drive. In this example, where we kind of throw this huck with our wrist, that allows you to just like pitch it up in the air and let it float and let it be a meatball. And notice how flat this thing is. Notice how it's out in front of the guy, lets him run onto it and make an easy play. Okay, not a huck, but the same thrower that we just looked at, and a very like full wrist snap throw that I just want to look at to kind of drive home the point of this thrower uses their wrist extremely well. So here's another example of the disc is completely on the right hand side of their hand here. So it's all the way on the right hand side of their hand. And then a few frames later, it's all the way on the left side of their hand. So the only way to get the disc from one side to the other that quickly is to snap your wrist. You can't do that by snapping at the elbow. You have to do that by snapping at the wrist. The other thing we can see in this clip, the elbow is obviously moving as he extends away from his body, but it's not rotating. So I think this is a really good example of, here he's got it loaded and bam, and his elbow is not doing a whole lot of work. So I'm holding this up as an example of of what a throw using just your wrist can look like. And notice how much touch it has. It kind of like it does that rising thing again. Notice how the frisbee is gaining elevation as it comes out of his hand, and it kind of meatballs up in the air, and it's nice and flat, and it's really easy to catch. So putting touch on the disc means that you have to throw it with your wrist. And this is just a really good example of a great wrist thrower throwing a nice touch pass out to space away from the defense. Okay, bit of a change of direction here. We're still watching a huck, but we're not going to focus so much on snapping of the wrist. In this one, I'm just much more interested in how this thrower sets up their huck. So in this moment, you can see, they've got the disc on the right-hand side of their body. They're not doing that thing where they like hold the disc all the way out here. They've got it still on their core, but it's shifted onto the right-hand side of their body. You can see how their left leg isn't holding a whole lot of weight. All their weight is on their right leg. So they're just kind of leaning right very subtly. And as this thrower realizes, okay, I'm going to want to throw a huck, he's seeing this. He is noticing that this defender is coming down, and he's seeing that his person might have space to go deep. And he's thinking, okay, I might have an opportunity for a huck here, but I got a mark that's up in my face going a little flat on me. I need to set this up. So we just get this explosive shimmy move. And I've talked about this a bit. If you start with the disc on one side of your body, all you have to do is shimmy it to the other side of your body. And I've told people a whole lot, like, show the marker the disc on one side of their hip. Like, if here he's showing the disc to the marker's left hip, and then a few frames later, boom, he's just showing the disc to the marker's right hip. So start with the disc on one side of your mark's body, and then bring it to the other side. And it doesn't need to be really long, big moves. These explosive moves from one hip to the other can be enough to shake your defender, and that can be enough. Now you have an open hucking lane. And as we watch this ball go, notice how flat it is, notice how out in front it is. It just lets his player go make the play. So a lot of us, I think, might have been tempted to try to throw some big blade that was like on the cone, on this line here, but this is just a nice flat huck out to space. This isn't the middle of the end zone, but we're far away from the sideline, so we're not dancing with danger over here. This is a huck that I showed during the classroom session. I put it in here because I wanted everybody to have it. But as we watch this through, what I pointed out in the classroom session, hey, this dot right here is 10 yards inside of the end zone. As this throw goes off and comes to here, this dot is 10 yards inside the end zone. So this is like a 95-yard throw. This is a monster throw. But to dig a little deeper on it, this person catches the disc. And this is, again, that like rotation thing that I showed in the first clip and a little bit in the clip number 2. But in this moment, this person's chest is facing this way. As they rotate through, I think they get all the way through. So I think I pointed out in a previous clip that he only gets like 90. Clip number 2, the person only got like 90% of the way, 90 degrees through. Clip number 1, he got a full 180. I think this is also a full 180 all the way through. Chest goes from totally backwards to totally forwards. Another difference I see between clip number 1 and clip number 2 is this person's arm is quite a bit straighter than the thrower in clip number one was. So in clip one, I was focusing on, hey, he's got an elbow drive, you got core rotation, elbow drive, wrist drive. In this, I don't see so much elbow drive, so I'm just seeing a lot of rotation through the core. I'm seeing a long striate arm, kind of like a lever force on the disc, and then a ton of wrist snap, and this ball just flies. So there's just a fun clip.